Welcome to the Underground, the Steel City Underground, the black and gold standard for Pittsburgh Steelers coverage. Now, here are your hosts, Brian E. Roach and Zach Metkler.
Hey everybody, welcome to another edition of the Steel City Underground podcast, post-game edition. That's right, it's actual football with actual pads and actual players and different teams and all that stuff. And it's great to be able to talk about it for the first time in the 2019 season. I am the host who doesn't like toast, Brian E. Roach, and my brother from another mother, who is normally here in the booth, so to speak, with me, is out because he was at the game tonight. And so to step in and help us analyze our baby brother from another mother.
I like it.
The professor of football, Zach Metkler, joins us again. Zach, how you doing, man?
Not too bad. I'll tell you what, it was nice to actually get to see some action that wasn't just, white on yellow at Latrobe or some, fictitious thing we make up. It was nice to see them actually get out there and hit some other people today.
Yeah, I mean, you take preseason football with a grain of salt because it is preseason. It's pretty vanilla. Nobody is going over the top. But the games themselves still are a step up from what you're going to see in training camp, where you're going against your own guys, and hitting is even the hitting is not always at the highest intensity. So it was kind of fun to be able to watch a game, even though there weren't a lot of starters playing. No Ben Roethlisberger, no Juju, no Dante Moncrief, no James Conner, no Pouncey, no Villanueva, did DeCastro, did he play any snaps? I don't think he did he?
No, sir.
Nope, no DeCastro. So you're talking on the offensive side of the ball, really, the A-team was not there. And on the defensive side of the ball, which Joe and I had talked about this in the pregame, a lot of times on the defensive side, Tomlin seems to take the tact of these guys need to play. But I was surprised, no Cam Hayward, no Stephon Tuitt. A lot of the starters did get a chance to sit. We knew Joe Hayden wasn't going to play. But Mark Barron did play, and Devin Bush did play. And we got our first chance to see everything. I guess I should start off by saying the Steelers won. It's so I've seen a tweet circulating around the Twitterverse that basically says if the Steelers win their first preseason game, they're guaranteed to win the Super Bowl, because apparently we don't do it very often. I'm not going to bother to go back and look to see how often we've won our first preseason game. But yeah, okay, we're done. End of season now. We're going to win the Super Bowl. It's over. Forget it, because we won our first preseason game. It was, how can I say this? It was not a pretty game. It had its moments where things were interesting. You certainly could see where there was a lot of work that needed to be done. I think when we start breaking this thing down, you're going to see that Bruce Arians really wanted to win this game.
Yeah, that might be an understatement.
Yeah, and I look, hey, it's Pittsburgh Southeast, because you got Leftwich, you got Larry Foote is there, you got Arians, and there was a slew of other guys that are all ex-Steeler people working down there now. So, just as a general feeling, taking this game as a whole, before we start to get into details, what do you take away from this as an indicator of any kind?
Yeah, I think the first preseason game of every season for every team, you kind of have these moments where you can tell that there's a lot of players that are jittery. For a lot of these guys, it's the first time they've ever stepped onto an NFL field for any type of action, whether it's preseason or otherwise. So there's a lot of jitters. And then even some of the veteran guys, like I'll mention here later, but like even Josh Dobbs, they come out a little bit shaky, and you can tell they're anxious. They want to get out there and make a name for themselves. And I think you kind of start seeing some mistakes happen. You're still trying to get some of the new terminology into effect, or some of the new plays you might have added during the offseason. So you're going to see some shaky play at times. But I think overall, There's a lot to be excited about. I think there were a lot of great individual performances tonight for Pittsburgh, and I think that's kind of something that we haven't really seen in recent years from these first preseason games. I think a lot of times we see these games, like you kind of mentioned, and that first preseason game is kind of like, is this what it's going to be like for the next 4 games, and what's that going to translate to in the regular season? And obviously, the preseason is the preseason. You can't put a whole lot of stock into it. You see teams go 0-4 and make late season runs, and you see teams go 4-0 and claw their way to 3-13 on the season. So you can't put a whole lot of stock in it. But I thought there was a lot of individual performances that should have fans excited to see what the future can hold, especially once you start mixing in some of the big time names like Cam Hayward and Joe Hayden and that starting offensive line and Juju Smith-Schuster. I think there's a lot to kind of grasp from that we should be excited about.
Yeah, and I don't want people to read in too much to the beginning of this game. Because you essentially had Tampa Bay's starting offense against primarily a second-team defense for the Steelers. Yes, Devin Bush was on the field. Mark Barron was on the field. Javon J. Wobble Hargrave, he got to play a little bit and was in there. But beyond that, no Bud Dupree. As we said, no Cam, no TJ. Primarily. You're talking about the second layer guys, and the Buccaneers, I won't say without challenge, but fairly easily went down the field and scored a touchdown on their first drive. I don't necessarily not expect that when you're going 1s on 2s, and that is the situation. Now I know there will be people that read into it and go, oh wow, it was very porous when they had to play the 1s. It was done. Well, it's because you had the second team playing the 1s, and I think that I'm pleased by it for no better reason than it's good reps for those number 2 players, right? Think of it as that's great experience for these guys to have to go against starting caliber players, because in practice they oftentimes are going to run against the second team offense, and they're going to get reps against that same caliber. As Tomlin has often said, it's when you want to jump to the varsity. So these guys got a chance to jump to the varsity level tonight at the beginning. And while it wasn't 100% successful, there were some decent plays. I want to talk about individual performances at some point. But first, when you look at that from a general standpoint, do you see anything of grave concern because the 2s got outplayed by the 1s?
No, I think the thing that stood out to me the most from that first grouping against Jameis Winston-led Buccaneers offense was mainly you had guys like Justin Lane out there, and we've seen during training camp so far that some of these guys like him they're raw, they're rookies, and Jameis Winston isn't an elite quarterback by any means, but he's a starting caliber quarterback who I believe is a franchise caliber quarterback, and he's been around for a while. So even if he's an average quarterback, he's still going to get bullied by a guy who came into the league this year as a raw cornerback that we knew this was probably going to end up being a redshirt year for him, and he kind of looked like he was out of water a little bit because he was going against the 1s with not a whole lot of help around him or over the top. So there's nothing like stuff like that. That's not really that concerning to me. If it's later on and he gets thrown into a game and he has the starters around him and he still starts blowing stuff, then that's fine. But and the playbooks, especially in this first 1 or 2 preseason games, they're not the full playbooks a lot of times either. You don't want to tip your hand to all the coverages you're going to run, all the blitzes you're going to run, all the plays you're going to run on offense, because that just gives you unnecessary film to other teams, and you don't want them to have to go and have to use all that stuff against you. So even with that, you're not going to see some of the looks you might want to go against with matchups against opposing offenses, which also could play a hand in what the Steelers were doing today. So I'm not putting too much investment or stock into whatever it looked like the second team was doing generally against that Jameis Winston-led team. And there were opportunities to stop that drive. They just missed them. Devin Bush had some opportunities. He could have prevented some stuff. There were some pass breakups that looked like they were in position to make it happen, but didn't. So it's the first drive of the first preseason game with a bunch of subs going against a predominantly starting offense for Tampa Bay. I'm not worried about it.
Right, exactly. So let's look at the flip side, which is how the offense started. So we see the defense started a little weak. The offense didn't look great in the first first drive. I mean, Dobbs did end up throwing, I think it was the first series, he threw a nice pass to James Washington, a big gainer, like 40-something yards. But even then, I think that ball was slightly underthrown, and had he hit him in stride, maybe that's a 95-yard touchdown. I don't know that Washington had enough separation to get there, but he did have to wait on the ball. Still, nonetheless, Dobbs threw a nice ball in the pocket. It was a nice play. What concerned me the most about the initial set of drives was the play on the offensive line. Dobbs was getting a lot of pressure, and sometimes you watch it on television. It's not always so easy to see, and I was watching on an iPad tonight. It's not so easy to actually pick out everybody that is playing in what positions, but the guy that stood out not in a good way for me was Chooks. Chooks Okafor didn't have a good night. Seemed to get manhandled a little bit. And I know we talked about it a little bit in the back rooms, and you said he's had a good camp. So it's a little disappointing to see him come out and put this kind of performance up. What did you see on that aspect?
Yeah, it was definitely, I was a little disappointed because I've paid a close attention to him this year because I always like seeing offensive linemen, especially guys that aren't premier picks like he wasn't, since he was a late day 2 pick. I figured this would be a good opportunity for him to see him take some strides forward. He had that start last year against Denver, and he held his own for the most part against a guy like Von Miller. So I thought it could be a good opportunity for him to kind of make a name for himself. And I know he's been predominantly on the right side, and they had him on the left side of the line for most of the night, and maybe that was throwing him off. But I didn't think he looked that great. It wasn't even really a technique standpoint. It looked like he was just overwhelmed. While he was letting a lot of D linemen get into his body. He's a long offensive tackle, and he wasn't really using his length to his advantage to get good leverage on some of these D linemen. And I think that kind of put a lot of stress on the guards that were playing next to him. Or if he had tight end help in there, that stresses them, and they're forced to kind of abandon their side to try to help bail them out. And that kind of creates a cascade effect. And when you have a lot of guys in there that haven't been around the system that long, that your communication is going to be kind of poor to begin with. Because every team can have decent offensive linemen at the top, but how many great offensive linemen do you have going through your depth chart? I mean, you don't have all these David DeCastros and Marquise Pouncey's lining up behind them. So there is going to be some drop-off communication, which is a huge part of the offensive line. And I think when you have that kind of stress going on your edge, and you have guys trying to bail them out and whatnot, you're going to have some issues come about. But I was disappointed, and I'm hoping that this was kind of just a switch up from being on the right side to the left side, and he hasn't been as acclimated to that because I haven't seen him get a whole lot of reps on the left side in camp either.
Right.
So I'm hoping to see that was just tonight, and then we can kind of start to build that back up and see where he goes in the future. But I was expecting a lot more out of him, especially because he's been holding his own against guys like Ola Denny and Anthony Chickalo and players like that. He's kind of was surprising to say the least.
Yep. Now on the flip side of that, I think Filer got the start on the right side, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. He looked decent. And Zach Banner got a lot of time tonight. He got to play a lot of this game, as well as Big Gainesville. I think that's what Tomlin calls him, Big Gainesville.
Yeah.
He got a ton of time, and I was pleased with what I saw there. B.J. Finney, is B.J. Finney. We know he's going to be a competent, maybe even above average lineman. But to see a couple of those young guys in Zach Banner, who is just, both of those guys are just huge. Being able to play and work and drive in a full game, really, almost was encouraging from the offensive line standpoint.
Oh, it was. I mean, I think Fred Johnson, for starters, the guy is 6'7", 330, and the way he's able to move at guard, is something you don't see very often. I know a lot of people were in some of these back channels of Steelers fandom are kind of surprised a guy like him went undrafted, but there was a lot of consistency issues with him in college. And, Florida runs kind of a mixed system on offense, and, he's really kind of a zone scheme type of offensive lineman, which, plays well in what the Steelers do, having him climb up to that second level. And when he's as big as he is and he has the ability to use his size and his strength to his advantage, you see the success. He's not ready to be a prominent guy, I don't think, but I think he has a very solid chance of making this roster. I think his performance tonight certainly gave him that step up to continue that route, and I think he has a chance to potentially be a guy that down the road maybe we see competing for a spot here, especially with that left guard spot going to be up in the air here in a year or two with Ramon Foster getting up there in age. But Zach Banner, the team liked him enough to keep him around from last year. He kind of reformed his body. I believe he dropped some weight from last year and kind of reshaped himself from being the big kind of hulking guy he was to being, still big, but a little more trim. And I think that's paid a little dividend for him to go out there and be a little more able to stay on the field longer, be nimble, get into his reads more. I think both of them had good performances, and I think that certainly helped alleviate a little bit of the stuff we saw from Okorafor. But Matt Filer, at this point, this is his job. I don't envision at any point there's no other tackle on this line that is at any point at risk of taking his position away at right tackle. I mean, he's played this entire training camp like it was his job to lose, and he's had another solid performance tonight, and I think he's realistically going to be a guy that earns the job, and I think he's going to do well with it at that right tackle spot opposite of Big Al.
Yep, I think you're absolutely right. Okay, so let's look a little bit at how the game unfolded and what happened. Dobbs played a couple series through the first quarter and into the second quarter. He looked okay at times, I thought. He had the one nice pass, one nice long ball to James Washington. He had, I think he was 8 of 14. That's Hodges. He was 5 of 8 for 85 yards. The long was to the 43, 98.4 rating. Had a nice run. Used his legs when he needed to, and I think the thing because I think early in camp you were talking about Dobbs seemed to be relying more on his legs than he had the year before, and while I don't think his performance tonight was great, I don't think it was horrible, but at the same time I was actually glad to see that when he ran, it was appropriate. Yes. It was a good, he needed to run at that point because that was the option that was best suited for him. So he didn't look overly jittery in the pocket to me. Did you see the same thing?
Yeah, no, I thought he went through his progressions. Nothing was there. As you mentioned, the offensive line play was poor, which was giving him minimal time to even kind of try to check down. And I thought the running he did was appropriate, and he was also smart enough to slide. You see some of these mobile quarterbacks trying to wear some of these hits. I mean, he went midfield streaking down and slid right into it and, protected himself. I thought he was very efficient with his running, and it was very good when he did it. It wasn't at all forced, I didn't think.
Yeah, I thought, I don't know enough about Tampa, and I didn't bother to look it up to see whether they on the defensive side they started their starters. But I'm assuming since they started most of their starters on the offensive side, they may have done the same thing on the defensive side. I mean, Arians needs to get to know these guys. He's a first-year coach with them. So did you notice? Because what I noticed was their defensive line play was really good initially. And as the game wore on, it felt like the Steelers settled down a little bit, felt like they were able to better control the pass rush that was coming at them. But I don't know for sure whether the starters were in there. Do you know that?
Yeah, not 100% certain. I wasn't paying as much attention to some of their guys. I know based on some of the guys I saw making plays, I know they did have a decent amount of starters in there. But I don't want to say it was the same amount that the offense had. I think the offense wanted to get kind of in tune with Jameis Winston and Bruce Arians trying to get on the same page, seeing what they have working there. And I think the defense was similar, but not quite the same magnitude.
Okay. And if you broke down Josh Dobbs, you ended up with Dobbs, you ended up with Snell running the ball a little bit. I didn't think that Benny did not have a great start to the game. I think his first 2 carries were both for negative yards. but that was at the point where the Steelers were just the offensive line was just getting pounded into the backfield. It looked like on every play. But then, Benny came around. He had some nice runs later on in the game. I thought Dobbs was, as I said, okay, maybe average, Landry Jones-ish almost. I didn't think he was. I don't think he necessarily regressed from where he was last season, but I don't think he really vastly improved. I didn't see anything that made me go, wow, he's so much. That was a great improvement and a jump. I know it's early and this is only the first preseason game, and he was under, as we said, duress the entire time. But what was your take on him?
Yeah, I didn't think Dobbs had a bad night. I know people were going to be underwhelmed or not as impressed with his performance. I think Dobbs, of the three quarterbacks that are behind Ben, I think he has the least impressive arm talent. There's no denying his intelligence. I'm not going to waste my time saying he might be the smartest of them, because obviously he is. But I'm talking from a footballist perspective. I think he has a good head on his shoulders. I think that's the type of mentality that's going to make him be a viable backup in this league over a guy like Landry Jones. Even as the fact that you could tell he sees what's going on in the field in an efficient manner. It's just sometimes I think he struggles to make some of the throws. And I think when you're watching a guy compared to him like Mason Rudolph, who is a more natural arm talent, you kind of see that deficiency stand out a little bit more. So I don't. That's why I think Dobbs didn't have a bad night, because you can tell the reads were there. He was throwing to the right guy, but he would overthrow him or underthrow him. Like that pass to James Washington. If Ben makes that throw, I don't know if James Washington takes that to the house just because he doesn't have that deep speed. But I think he at least picks up an extra 20 yards in stride. And I think that's kind of a difference there, because it's just a matter of feeling out those throws and having the strength to make them. It was a very nice throw, but it might not have been the best pass to make that the most efficient gain you could. I think that's kind of what you're going to see with Dobbs. I think he has a career either with the Steelers or in the NFL in general as a viable backup where you can throw him in there. He can get it done on the ground and through the air, but he's never going to be a spectacular quarterback. And I think that kind of screams career backup to me. But I thought what I saw from the night, it wasn't bad by any means. It was just unspectacular. And I think for a backup quarterback who has the heat and is kind of just trying to linger around there, I think that's enough to get it done. But it might make fans a little bit nervous if he ever had to come into a game for an extended period of time, either one game, multiple games. I think fans would be a little more concerned about that. And I think what you saw tonight would probably be the highs and lows you'd experience. Hopefully be improved with better offensive line play than what we saw, but that's always a crapshoot.
Yeah. So I want to focus on the quarterbacks right now, because I think that's probably one of the more interesting battles that exists. And we've talked about whether Mason Rudolph can jump into the number 2 spot. And I would say that he's definitely making that progression based on his performance tonight. He had a very similar 5 of 8 for 91 yards, but was much more effective with what he was doing. I mean, his passer rating was 141 versus 98.4, and threw for 2 touchdowns as well. The biggest difference to me is watching Mason Rudolph, manage or control the offense. He looked like he knew what he just looked more in control. He knew where he wanted to go with the ball. He knew what he wanted to do. He knew where the right reads were. He knew what to avoid. He didn't do anything, overtly stupid. Didn't make any big mistakes. I mean, Josh had an interception that, Josh Dobbs had an interception that was overwrought by a penalty. So, I think it's right now, and I haven't seen enough of camp to know whether this is the case during camp as well. And you can tell me because you've been there more. But based on this game, it certainly looks like Rudolph is making the same kind of statement that Dobbs made last season that bounced essentially Landry Jones out, which is, I'm the number 2 guy, and I should be looked at that way. Do you think that's the direction he's headed?
Yeah, I mean, I think when you watched him in camp, I felt before coming into this game, I felt that he was making a name for himself for what should be the number 2. I mean, you think about even just the pedigree difference between Rudolph and Dobbs. if Rudolph comes out any other year that's not that loaded class that we saw in 2018, he's realistically a almost guaranteed first round pick. I know fans say that that's been why he fell to the third round, but once those main guys were gone, no teams were clamoring for quarterbacks, so the Steelers could gamble and hope that he was going to be there. I think he was a legitimate first round candidate that just happened to fall. Last year, there was just a whole getting used to it. You come from the Big 12, and everything is different when you get to the NFL. That's why you see some of these quarterbacks fizzle out. I think he took the proper route this offseason to get better, to improve his mechanics, improve his timing, improve his arm strength. I forget who the gentleman is he went with that has trained. He's a pitching coach for the MLB, but he's trained quarterbacks like Aaron Rodgers and Drew Brees with some of their mechanics. I think you're starting to see that. His timing tonight was fantastic. I keep making this comment, but I mean, his out route timing is pretty much incredible compared to where it was before. I mean, the out route's one of the harder throws to make in any level of football, and he's making it seamlessly. He's anticipating where the receiver is going to be. He's putting in the spot where only he can get it, and it's with nice speed right on the side. I mean, it's fantastic, and it's pretty to watch. And I think these throws and the ability for him to go through his reads much more calm than he was before. I think he's showing that he has the makings of a guy who's the number 2. And I think if he had to come into a game down the road with some of the talent there wouldn't be the same type of drop-off you saw last year whenever Dobbs came in against Oakland. And that's just my gut. Like I said before, Dobbs doesn't have the arm talent that a guy like Rudolph has. I mean, Rudolph is an intelligent quarterback. I think he's a much more commanding leader of a football field. I know some skilled players made comments about him early on in the offseason or in the training camp where, he's coming out there and he's commanding the huddle. He's telling guys what they're doing wrong if they mess up on a route. That's some leadership type stuff you don't necessarily always see from year 2 quarterbacks, especially ones that are backups. So I think seeing that type of progression from him and then seeing that translate onto the field to the tune of just shy of 100 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 141 passer rating. I mean, I think he proved tonight and will continue to do so that he probably is going to end up being the number 2, which is the best thing for him. I think it's the best thing for the Steelers now and hopefully in the future as they consider what life might be like once Ben ultimately retires.
Yep, I agree. Now, there is a brewing sense, I think, amongst Steelers fans, Steelers Nation, that the fourth arm in camp, Devlin Hodges, Devlin Duck Dynasty Hodges, I'm going to just call him Duck from now on, because if Tomlin can call him Duck Dynasty, I can call him Duck, and it's no disrespect, because I love nicknames. Anyway, Duck Dynasty got a lot of time tonight. And I don't know that going into this game, I'm not sure anybody would have predicted he would have gotten as much time as he did. I think people semi-expected it to be Dobbs first half, Rudolph second half, end of story. And if Hodges got in, it would be a little bit in the fourth quarter. Didn't turn out that way. He came in the third quarter and finished out the game. Was able to throw his first touchdown pass, essentially keep the Steelers in the lead so that they ended up being, the winners. Had a decent night, 8 of 14, 79 yards, had a long of 20, which I think was a screen to Benny Schnell, and a passer rating of 97. Now, here's the takeaway that seems to be coming, because everybody falls in love. Steelers Nation loves to fall in love with underdogs. And there's always this guy that they think, he's the guy that was picked up off of the scrap heap, but somehow he's going to become a Hall of Famer. I'm not saying that Devlin Hodges isn't going to be a good quarterback or isn't going to find a job someplace, and maybe even with the Steelers. I'm not even poo-pooing that by the end of all of this, there's some way that they go, we got to keep him around. But I don't know that I saw tonight anything that tells me you've got to keep him above Josh Dobbs. And that's there's no way they're keeping 4 quarterbacks. And I don't believe you can throw a quarterback on the practice squad simply because what's the point? The third string quarterback barely gets snaps all season long. Some guy in the practice squad, you're taking away a position that you actually can use for a quarterback that's never going to do anything. So I just don't see that as a feasibility. That means he's got to beat Josh Dobbs out in order to stay on the roster. Did you see anything? I mean, I thought it was a nice game by Devlin Hodges. I also thought he was playing against a bunch of guys who are going to be in the same position than he is, struggling to either be on the practice squad or to scramble onto a roster. Did you see anything out of him that made you think he could supplant Josh Dobbs or Mason Rudolph as the number 3?
Not right now. I mean, I think it was a huge surprise. I didn't expect it at all to see him get in the game at all, let alone, like you said, for an entire half, essentially, where he was in there, calling the shots. I thought it was a nice performance by him. It wasn't the greatest quarterback performance of all time by a fourth-string quarterback in a preseason game in the second half against undrafted free agents and depth players. But, I thought he did well, all things considering. And I think his entire story to this point has really been a driving force as to why fans are so enamored with him. I mean, the guy was a tryout prospect who's kind of clawed his way here. And I think he's proven enough at this point in time that I think if he doesn't end up with the Steelers in some capacity, he's not going to just be unemployed. I think he's going to get a job relatively quickly somewhere in the league, either on a practice squad or a third spot for a team looking just for a developmental quarterback. I mean, he has the arm talent. He has a rocket attached to his body when he throws that ball. I think, you could tell he's still learning everything. He wasn't flawless tonight. And I think fans need to kind of temper that expectation, of the fact that he is, right now at least, genuinely competing with Dobbs. Because I think Dobbs has his roster spot locked up. I think it's going to take a lot for Hodges to supplant him in any form. I think it's going to take a lot for Dobbs to have to really screw up for that to even come close to being a real thing. I just think the Steelers have a much higher investment in Dobbs than they do with Hodges, just with the draft capital. Dobbs is a third-year NFL quarterback who has some game experience and just knows the system. He has the dual threat capabilities you don't have from any other quarterback on the roster. I think unless Hodges really turns it on, there's more benefit to keeping Dobbs than there is Hodges. But I think Hodges is doing a lot right now to prove that he needs to be in the league somewhere. And I hope he does, because he's doing everything he needs to. And, you love those stories. I'd be surprised if it was in Pittsburgh over Dobbs at that you would even see that happen. I'd be surprised.
Yeah. I mean, overall, I think I was pretty happy with the quarterback play considering the situation. Where I was maybe slightly less happy we know I wasn't happy with the line play. I didn't think that the defensive line played tremendously well either, although I saw some good things from Bugs. I think I saw a couple plays where Javon Hargraves, when he was in, just blew up whoever was in front of him, which he is wont to do at times. I think our cornerback in waiting, Justin Lane, he had a rough night to begin with, but I did think he settled down. He played, I think, the entire game.
Yeah, he did. He was in there the entire game.
I mean, I get that they had a shortage of cornerback bodies tonight to a certain extent, and I do think that I think that is why I'm not going to be overly concerned with what I was seeing. Because, look, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, I don't know whether they came in thinking this is what they were going to do or if they just adjusted as they went along and said this is what we're going to do. But I think Bruce Arians, as I said at the top of this, really wanted to win the game. They threw the ball almost 60 times in a preseason game. 60 throws. I mean, that's crazy.
It was absolutely insane watching because Ryan Griffin had 45 passes, 43 passes?
43 passes, yeah.
Yeah.
And, I mean, look, Jameis Winston came in and he was very efficient. 5 of 6, had a nice 134 passer rating, got the touchdown, and was done. And from that point on, I think Blaine Gabbert had one series, and then it was Griffin the whole rest of the way. He was 26 of 43 for 330 yards. I mean, when you look at the stats, if you're thinking 420 yards passing, I think there was only the one turnover, really, that the Steelers managed to get. I don't think there was a second one, was there?
Not to my knowledge, no.
Yeah, and, I mean, it was close, which is indicative of this, but, I mean, I think Tampa Bay had way more first downs than we did. I'm trying to pull up the number exactly because I can't remember. First downs. They had 31 first downs. We had 19. If you have 31 first downs and the other team has 19, you assume the team with 31 won. The defense had some nice stops. I mean, I think. Well, let me put it this way: the highlight of the defense for me was Devin Bush.
Oh yeah,
he had a great, initial start here. I think he had 10 tackles, 7 solo. Had a really nice combination with Ola stop in the backfield on a 4th down run. I think he was close. He was very near to an interception. Nice pass defense. I'll tell you that I liked almost everything I saw. What I didn't like, and what concerns me the most of everything, is that Tampa Bay fed tight ends all night long. And some of those were over Bush early on, and as time went on, they were, over whoever else was in there. But the tight ends seemed to be open constantly. And that's been a bugaboo of the Steelers, but that's part of what, these guys are here for, to be fast enough to cover those tight ends. And there were times, and obviously it's a very vanilla defense that they're playing right now. He's adjusting to things. I'm excited by what I saw, but I'm a little concerned that I thought I would see better coverage than I did in some ways. What did you see out of our number 1 draft pick?
Yeah, I mean, I'm hoping that a lot of that was the fact that they were playing a lot of soft zone. I mean, I'd have to go back and watch a lot of the tape, but it looked to me from just quick glance and, not paying as much attention to what they were actually running, it looked like there was a lot of zone. But I mean, I made the comment during the last podcast that, Devin Bush, I think, has a really legitimate chance of being a Defensive Rookie of the Year candidate. During the game, I actually saw a thing from OddsShark that he actually now has the best odds of any player in this rookie class to be the Defensive Rookie of the Year. And I think tonight showed that I don't think that's too far-fetched to think about. I mean, he had 10 tackles in one half of football. I mean, I put the stat out during the game. Last season, a Steelers linebacker only had 12 tackles in a game twice. L.J. Fort had one game of 12 tackles, and Vince Williams had another one of 12 tackles. He had 10 in one half. I mean, the very first play of the game he was in on there was that crucial 4th down stop where it was 4th and inches where he just blitzed up through the line and was able to stuff the running back in the backfield for a loss with Ola, no other, to make the turnover. And then there was another play, too, I forget which one it was, where you see him come downhill in a hurry, and he takes on an offensive tackle who's about 6 inches taller than him and outweighs him by about 100 pounds and just buries him into the ground, blows up the lane, and makes the tackle. I mean, that stuff you can't coach up. Either you have that or you don't. And seeing him make these types of plays all over the field, it seems like even if he wasn't in on the tackle, he was within a yard or two away to ensure that it was going to be wrapped up. I mean, he was flying to the ball. And the one thing that stuck to me, which I was very happy to hear about, was at halftime whenever Mike Tomlin was doing a quick interview with Missy Matthews. He made a comment about how he was pleased with his play, but he was very pleased with the communication on the field and how clear and how clean it was. And I think that's something the Steelers defense has lacked a lot since Ryan Shazier left. I think having a guy like Bush who's so quickly acclimating to that role, who's getting more confident as time's going along with making the right calls and putting the defense in position to be successful, it's going to be huge for them. And then you pair that with his on-field talent and athleticism. I think that's going to be a huge factor in seeing the Steelers improve if they want to make the next step up to be legitimate top-tier defense. But I think for a first performance, you couldn't have asked for a better performance at this point in time by him. I think he was everything as advertised. He was going sideline to sideline to chase down running backs out of the backfield, make plays down the field, come up filling his run lanes. I was impressed. It was nice seeing him go against somebody that wasn't a Steelers player.
Yeah,
he lived up to the occasion.
Yeah, I said overall I was really, really happy and felt like this was one of those moments that us old guys can remember Joe Green saying in a preseason game when Franco Harris took off for a touchdown run. He was like, "We got one," and that's kind of how I feel watching Devin Bush. It's like, we got one. He's a good one, and it looks like he is as advertised. Now, the other guy, one of the other guys that I really wanted to watch was Ola, and I was encouraged. He didn't get there. I mean, if somebody had told you the first sack that the Steelers are going to get is by Tyler Matakevich, I think you'd have gone, huh? But that was the first sack they got on the night, and while that's great, and I will tell you, I thought Dirty Red played better than I have anticipated him playing. But admittedly, most of that was against, back end guys. I still don't want to see him as a starter, but I'm becoming more. I was still excited about seeing him. He's still a good football player. Just because I don't think he's good enough to be a starter doesn't mean he's not a good football player. And it's fun to watch him play because he's very smart. But Ola, in his first shot at varsity football, he had some nice pressures. He just didn't ever get home. He got close, didn't quite get there. And he had to drop back in coverage a couple times, maybe even more than a couple times. I thought he was okay doing so. I do think he got beat a couple times in coverage. But what did you see from Ola or not see that you expected to?
Yeah, I think fans somewhat need to temper their expectations with him. I mean, he's not going to dominate every single play like he does against some of the second and third string linemen he goes up against with the Steelers in training camp. I think he did well. He's not T.J. Watt, and I almost would venture to say I don't think he's at the level right now that Bud Dupree is either. I think he's very firmly in that tier with Anthony Chickillo, who right now he's a very solid depth player. You can call in certain situations. He might make some plays, but that'll be the extent of it. I think he was much more efficient on special teams. I thought he was much more efficient against the run tonight than he was against as a pass rusher. It wasn't that he was bad as a pass rusher, but there were a couple plays I saw him. He just got sucked up into the lineman. You kind of saw because he is small in stature. He's not a huge, long guy like a T.J. Watt or even a Bud Dupree, where they have that length and that athleticism and size. You saw him get kind of sucked up at times by offensive lineman. I think the one play, I forget who the tackle was he was going up against. The tackle wasn't even moving his feet. He was just standing there stonewalling him, and there was nothing Ola could do to get off of it. Then there were other plays where he saw him put this nice move on, and he'd dip underneath and bat the hands down and get to the quarterback and, almost get there, I should say. But I thought it was an encouraging performance. He's not there yet. I think he has potential to be something. I think he'll be a rotational piece at some point during the year as a specialist pass rusher. But I think he's earned a spot on this roster very clearly. I mean, he's at worst the fourth best pass rusher on the team. Realistically, probably has a higher ceiling at this point than Chickillo does. But it was encouraging to see him in there get some action against more reputable players than Gerald Hawkins and some of these other undrafted guys like Damian Prince and you name them. So I was encouraged by it.
All right, now, I mean, I think that covers the bigger names that we were looking for. Who stood out? Other than that, who stood out for you in this game that made you think, okay, let me see what comes next from this guy?
So all offseason, ever since the draft, realistically, I've been excited to see Ulysses Gilbert go out there and perform. And it was the end of the game. He was really getting some action in there. So I'm going to temper whatever production he had and, take it with a grain of salt, things considering. But, I thought that interception he had on the 2-point conversion?
Yep.
Attempt, I thought that was a very nice read and a very nice play by him. And then, he had 1.5 sacks in the course of his game, and he led the team in sacks, and they were nice plays. He's a very smart player. He's an athletic player. I just think he has a long way to go developmentally, and that's why he fell to where he fell in the draft. He was a 6th-round pick for a reason. So I think he's a guy that I don't know if he's going to be on the active roster this year if he ends up being a practice squad guy, but if he can start branching together some of these performances, and he hasn't had a bad camp, he's just had a very quiet camp. And as a 6th-round pick, I'd rather have a quiet camp than a bad camp, because at least that means you're not messing up to the point where people are waiting for you to be cut. You can be quiet enough and have these nice preseason performances and kind of start convincing coaches to put you in there a little bit earlier. I think that can help you stick around, and he has the special teams value. So he's gotten a lot of reps from what I've seen in training camp with some of the 1s and 2s on special teams. So I'm excited to see him go. I thought he really kind of stepped up, given the opportunity at the end of the game to make some splash plays, regardless of what the competition level was. But I was happy with his performance, and I want to see if he can kind of grow from this. And I'd like to see him stick. I think he's a really nice special team standout, and he has the athletic traits to be a guy that can really contribute in that capacity and maybe even learn the defense down the road. So we'll see what happens with him. But I was pleased with his performance later tonight.
Yeah, Gilbert was a guy that stood out to me. I liked a lot about some of the second level linebackers. Spillane, I thought, had a decent game. He wasn't great in coverage at times, but he was combative. I thought that was encouraging. He and it seemed like he had a nose for the ball. Tuzar Skipar, that was a heck of a move that he had.
Oh yeah,
that was a nice sack that he put on. And then on the offensive side, Johnny Holton had himself a little game.
Oh yeah,
and I'm happy for him. I thought he got more time than I thought he would. Again, it's once more, when you're projecting things, I didn't expect him to get as much time as he got. But when guys like Juju and Dante are not going to get any, and I think Ryan Switzer was in for a couple plays, but I think only one pass from Dobbs he was even thrown in his direction. That it was a nice game by Holton, I thought. I mean, you can see why people are interested. And I thought Deontay Spencer had that one nice punt return. I think for him to have a legitimate shot at making the 53, though, he's got to take a couple of those to the house in the preseason. And just blow them away and say, you have to have me on here as a punt returner. Because I don't know. I think Ryan Switzer is shifty. I think he's a decent punt returner, but I don't think he has the speed to really be the guy that's going to break the game open for you. As a punt returner. But maybe Deontay Spencer could. So if he can eke out that role, I think that's his route to the 53-man roster. Otherwise, I don't know that he has a great way to get there. And I don't know about Johnny Holton either. It's tough because we've talked repeatedly. They're deep. Wide receiver. It's tough to crack that room. So I jumped on the offensive side. Did you have an offensive anybody that stood out to you other than the guys that we've talked about?
I mean, not really. I mean, obviously, James Washington was a stud tonight.
Oh, absolutely.
But of the guys who are really kind of clawing for it, I thought Spencer had that nice return. I thought that was something he needed. I thought he had some missed opportunities on offense that could have helped him out tremendously. But when he had the opportunity to get some of those punts, and you could tell he started kind of calming down, and he was putting more moves in the open field to at least get some extra yardage. I think when you're looking at return men on the roster, he has the highest upside of a guy who you feel who can bust a play open at any point in time and gets the ball in his hands. It's not that Switzer can't. I just feel as though, you know what you get with Switzer. He's going to beat you because he puts a good move on. He's not going to burn you. I think Spencer can do both. He can burn you and put a good move on you in the open field. And I think, like you said, if he can get one of these to just go, that might be enough. The Steelers haven't traditionally kept an exclusive kick returner on there for quite some time. The one that sticks to my mind is Allen Rossum.
Yeah.
And that's been a fortnight since that's happened. So, I think that you're going to have his best chance of sneaking in that way and trying to convince them, hey, you need to keep 7 receivers because I'm going to be your special teams ace. But I think he still has an uphill climb to get to that point, especially if he doesn't improve a whole lot of work on offense, which tonight, he went 2 for 17 on 4 targets. There were some missed opportunities there for him, and albeit some might not have been the best passes, but honestly, there weren't as many standouts on offense as I thought as there were on defense from the lesser-known guys. Yeah. I think Holton did well for himself. I think that 60-yard run he had was a very nice run. That kind of showcased his speed and abilities. And this wasn't as deep of a receivers group. I think he would have a chance to kind of be that DHB clone, that kind of gunner person you throw in there every now and then because he has the height and the speed. But I think he also has. I think he's more of a practice squad caliber player. Beyond that, but the one guy I will say I thought kind of impressed me as time went along was Benny Snell. I thought when that first offensive line was in there with Josh Dobbs, I thought I felt awful for Snell. He had nothing. There was nothing he could do. There was nothing given there. But as the line play started to improve a little bit, as the defensive line play progressed with the offensive line, I guess that's the most polite way of saying that. You kind of start seeing him get more comfortable. The lanes were there a little bit more, so he was able to showcase some of his moves, his burst through. I thought he finished the game much stronger than he did. His stat line won't tell you that much. I mean, his stat line was 2 yards per carry, 13 carries for 26 yards. It's not that impressive, but there was a lot more to work with, I thought, there. And then in the pass game, I thought he contributed a little bit. So I'm excited to see if he can take this. And once he starts getting some actual solid line play in front of him, I think he'll be much more impressive. But there were glimpses of that tonight that I thought you kind of can pull from and give you some hope for the future.
Yeah, I just in case this got by anybody, here's proof that Zach is an old soul, and one of the reasons we call him Professor, he used the word Fortnite in a sentence. And not referring to a game. So, all right. There's a couple other things I got to talk about. One is related to the game, and I'm calling out Derek Overly. Don't just get off my lawn. Don't be defending the refs. The refs stink. They stunk tonight. They stink constantly. The refs stink. Oh, it feels so good to say that. And get off my. Give me that crap about it's their preseason. Blah. I call you out, young man.
You're the real one that's in midseason form right now, Brian.
There you go. The refs stink, and they always do. Now, the other thing that I feel like before we end this podcast, we have to touch on, even though he is no longer, thank God, a member of the Pittsburgh Steelers, is I don't even know what to call him. Let's just call him Helmet Boy. At this point, the guy who we traded to the Steelers are starting to look like just mad geniuses in reading the incredibly insane personalities of some of the people that they've let go. In that, this guy that they traded for a third and a fifth to the Raiders. The Raiders are never going to do a deal with the Steelers again after this. First he burns up his feet by improperly wearing some whatever footwear he's supposed to wear while he goes into a cryogenic chamber. So he freezes, gets frostbite on his feet. That's crazy enough. But now he's threatening to never play football again because they won't let him wear his favorite helmet. Because that helmet has been banned, is no longer viably safety. This is a league that's sued for billions of dollars because of player safety. And now, he wants an exception because his favorite hat, which always makes his head feel good, he can't wear. And he's threatening to not come in. I mean, you tweeted out a thread that, somebody else's thread, I don't remember whose, that details the insanity that has gone on. I mean, the Raiders must be like, the next time the Steelers call us, you don't answer that phone. Ever. Because I just don't, a third for Martavis Bryant, and Martavis Bryant flames out with them. And now a third and a fifth for, Mr. Helmet Boy. And this goes on. Look, if he doesn't come on and essentially have the season of all seasons, this is starting to look like there's no way to spin this as a good deal for the Raiders.
No. And that's the thing. You think about the Steelers, everyone always, every year, this seems to be the thing. The Steelers, everyone questions a trade the Steelers make when they trade away, get certain guys, they trade for somebody. They were criticized by a lot of people for trading for Vance McDonald. Why would Kevin Colbert ever do that? Now imagine a life where we don't have Vance McDonald as the starting tight end. They would criticize the Steelers for trading away Martavis Bryant, who now is fighting and clawing to even get back into the lead. He was suspended. Lord knows if he'll ever play another snap again. Then the Steelers get criticized for trading away Antonio Brown for third and fifth. Now the Raiders lost those picks, gave him a fat contract, and there's a chance that he might not even step foot on a field for them. The Steelers, like you said, they fleeced the Raiders. If I'm John Gruden, if I'm Mike Mayock, I'm never calling the Steelers again. I'm not doing anything. I'm trying to get back on the phone with the Bears and see if there's any way they'll negotiate getting Khalil Mack to come back or something like that. Because at this point, you need to do something to make yourself feel better and feel good about it. But it's, to me, I did that piece back in the spring about did we miss the warning signs with Antonio Brown, and everyone was criticizing the Steelers, saying it was Big Ben that was the toxic one. It was Mike Tomlin who just couldn't get a rap on the locker room. And now you're hearing the same stuff that you heard from Pittsburgh, where Antonio Brown is late to meetings. When he's in meetings, he's disinterested, or he's looking at his bank accounts to see how much money he has going into each of his bank accounts. And, he's liking pictures on Instagram. He has yet to really build a chemistry with Derek Carr. Antonio Brown can afford to miss practices with the Steelers because he had 9 years of experience with Ben Roethlisberger. You don't have chemistry in that offense. You don't have chemistry with Derek Carr. You don't have chemistry with the other receivers around you. You're not there. I don't care how talented you are. That's going to, even if he is ready to play and is there week one, and this whole helmet gate ends up being just a farce that's being put on by HBO to make the ratings go up for Hard Knocks. You're not going to have the chemistry to go out there and perform right away. It's not going to just be a seamless transition. You think you hear it all, and then you hear a story like this, and you don't think that there's any way you can one-up it. I mean, I have to do some deep research on this, but he'd have to go down as the first player in NFL history to retire because he didn't like his helmet. I mean, and like they phase these helmets. I mean, when I was in college playing football, I had to change my helmet. I went from having one of the old Revolution helmets to getting a Revolution Speed helmet because they had to change them because they're phasing some of the old ones out because they get too old and the technology in them isn't as up to date as some of these new helmets. It's not a big deal. I've never heard someone threaten their career because they had to change a helmet. I mean, that's just absolutely mind blowing to me, and I don't know any other way to spin it other than the fact that he got his money, he got out of Pittsburgh, and now he's going to threaten his career and screw over the team that took a shot on him. I don't know. I'm blown away by it.
I'm quitting my job because I don't like the way the keyboard touches my fingers. I'm sorry. I need a softer keyboard. I need my special keyboard. Did he have a security blanket when he was young? And this is just a transference. So they took away his security blanket. Now he's a security helmet. I don't know. I just don't know. But yeah, it's very odd.
The absolute least.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it was. I think we can wrap this all in a bow. It's nice that the Steelers come out ahead. Pulling out a 30-28 win. Am I right?
Yep.
You can tell I've closed all my windows that have my stats up. They held on to win the game. It's encouraging. It's nice to get a win, even if it's a somewhat meaningless preseason game. A lot of good stuff to see. A lot of ways for the team to grow moving into the next preseason game, and we will just it's good that football is really back, and now we've got weeks and weeks ahead where there's actually football. So it's good that the season has started.
100%. It feels more real now than it did talking about it during training camp and whatnot. And it's crazy to think that in less than a month, we'll be opening up week one, seeing the Steelers go up to New England and be able to take on Tom Brady and the Pats up north. So it's exciting to kind of get to that point and seeing how things are going to shake out. And anytime there's real football on TV, I don't care if it's, Hall of Fame players or if it's, an undrafted free agent who's going to be unemployed in a couple of weeks. It's exciting just to have football back and be back in this atmosphere. And it feels surreal almost. And it feels this way every year, but it's just nice to be back in that mindset. Absolutely.
So, thanks for taking the late night evening here to do a little post game conversation, Zach. It's always a pleasure to have you. Anything you want to close with, my friend?
No, just the best time of the year right now.
Excellent. All right, and that's how we're going to wrap it up. Everybody, my name's Brian. His name's Zach, and as I always like to tell you, it's chaos out there. Be kind, except maybe to Helmet Boy, and we'll see you next time.
We would like to thank you for listening and remind our listeners to follow us on social media and our website, www.steelcityunderground.com.